public boards and also special purpose acquisition companies, just technology. And so, obviously my expertise is in logistics technology, and I also believe that that's the next big thing, and that we're really at the beginning of the digitization of the supply chain. Truth is that in large respect, there hadn't been in the 100 years that much innovation in supply chain. It's still very, very inefficient, not necessarily as customer experiential as it could be, specifically in the B2B world. I think the biggest change that we have seen is e-commerce and the Amazon effect that kind of happened to logistics, and that whole process has created this kind of fervor to be able to create those type of efficiencies and experiences throughout the broader supply chain. And when you look at what's happening with some newer technologies like AI and machine learning, and even the cloud, and then potential of blockchain, these are all going to be enablers of bringing out the efficiencies in the supply chain, as well as creating better customer experience.
Walid, we've left you for last a quick intro, and just very curiously, Alan, while you talk about optimizing the supply chain, I was chatting with Walid earlier, and he wants to completely disintermediate the existing supply chain and talk about direct-to-consumer models. So it's very interesting how the B2B logistics industry is embarked on a journey to digitize, and we're all very big believers in that, this region, in logistics and making logistics better. Walid, with his association with China, will be talking to us momentarily about direct-to-consumer models, which I thought is very interesting, and to me is the beginning of something under the topic, the next big thing. Walid? A little bit louder.
I don't know if you can hear me now, but thank you, Igor. Jada. We appreciate you.
Volume, please.
I'm happy to be here and happy to join you, and thank you so much for the questions. So MSA Capital is a $2 billion AUM global fund, founded in 2015 and has consistently produced top quartile returns. We invest in over 100 companies so far and many leading sectors. We have 16 unicorns and 12 IPO. And what we've done is we've created an emerging markets focused fund. One of the only ones that is a global institutional fund investing systematically in emerging markets. And we evaluate investments and opportunities via a Chinese lens. So we support companies through a Chinese kind of playbook. MSA has invested in companies through consumer, healthcare, core tech sectors, such as Meituan, that does food delivery and services, NIO, which is electric vehicles, Didi, ride-hailing, and many others. So, to your question on the next big thing, and thank you, Ivo, for kind of narrowing the scope a little bit, because it's beautiful for us to dream about what the future may look like. But I feel, if you allow me to break it down into 3 stages, we have what's happening now, which is business models that are ready for scaling and ready to go into emerging technology markets, such as B2B marketplaces. Both Shane and I have invested in a company called Capita, working capital lending, sort of buy now, pay later, taking these scalable models that are in other markets and really bringing it to the emerging markets in order for them to sort of catch up and plug in the holes of where they are. And in terms of next, What's the next big thing? We feel like, from an MSA perspective, we kind of have a cheat sheet looking into the future on models that are already working in China. And what we see is, financial super apps. We've invested in New Bank in Brazil, which is basically an Ant Financial replica. Just 2 days ago, we invested in the largest round of financing in Iraq, which is a company called Bally, which is a Meituan super app of services. As well, I think the next big thing is social commerce, group buying, live streaming, all of these models that have worked successfully at scale in China and are sort of picking up a lot of headway in emerging markets. We have companies in Egypt and Saudi like Remor Tiger, Flex Talk, and others. And in Latin America, it's the same thing. We have a company called Facili and another company called Fablo. So we feel we kind of are looking at models that have scaled successfully already in China and how they can be adapted to emerging technology markets. And on the logistics side of things, Alan, it's great to hear your thoughts as well. And we think with the advent of what's happening with e-commerce, supply chain logistics is being completely, or it's about time for it to be disrupted. And we think a lot of robotics are coming into it, a lot of things where not only in local markets, but China being a producer in a lot of these products, needs to be ready for export to go abroad in places like MENA. And then the last segment is the long-term stuff, and I think, just kudos to what's happening in Saudi Arabia and NEOM. I think the future of drones and AI and what's happening in the future is everybody's guess. But like Ted said, I think a lot of these things are already in the embryonic stage, and it's just about timing until they hatch. And I think the future is super exciting.
Good. We'll start with you again. I wanted to start honing in and maybe develop one topic of your choice for the next big thing. I don't want to put words in your mouth, whether that will be something around health tech, perhaps based on your experience, something around blockchain technologies, including everything else that goes around that broad concept, perhaps something around logistics. With you, Alan, and with you, Walid, because you very nicely broke down the imported next big thing for this region, but actually existing elsewhere, versus the true next big thing. I will leave you with a choice, because you listed a few things there in your introduction, whether that is direct-to-consumer retail models, or perhaps you want to, develop fintech. I will leave you with you. But for the rest of the panel, I suggest let's pick one and then talk a little bit about it and then brainstorm with the audience whether this is something that's immediately applicable to the region, for example.
Well, thank you. I guess I'll start. Health tech is perfect. That's where I have most experience in investing and exits. But I also want to see health tech and blockchain, or health tech and smart contracts.
There's going to be crossover.
Exactly, and that's one of the things I'd say is a big new thing, is that kind of a combination.
Okay.
Whether it's the government, or whether it's the city or the town, we want people to become more self-responsible when it comes to their health. And it's a very challenging situation, because to be responsible, usually you're a stakeholder, obviously my health, but when somebody else is paying for it, I take it for granted. So I'm going to eat that steak, and I'm going to take maybe less care of myself, because somebody else is going to pay for that nice hospital that the county just built, And so in looking at that, it's slowly gravitating in a variety of health payment situations, what have you. We're focused a great deal on remote patient monitoring, and where the data is actually going to end up being the key value. But the immediate is to produce engagement of individuals with their care providers. Now, that care provider may be a machine with Dr. Smith or Dr. Diablo in the front, but the machine is doing the analysis of the data that might be coming off of a simple handprint that the person's doing from their home, and it's so this is kind of leave it at that, but I'm very excited in the sense of health tech, and I'm really eager to understand, but I do not know if the GCC and Neiman region, I know they're very eager to build big hospitals and have Cleveland Clinic come in and what have you, but where is the health going here? Is it becoming more self-responsible based?
Understood. Yeah. To echo your point, and I'm very happy we identified clearly one of the first next big things, which is the possibility based on data to do remote patient monitoring. I read a research report recently and it talked about ambient intelligence, not artificial intelligence, ambient intelligence. And it is devices in the context of home care, retirement homes, and hospitals where the ambience of the operating theater or the recovery facility changes depending on who the patient is. And it didn't go into further explanation whether that means lighting, temperature, or the procedures and processes and sequences of meds that will be given to the patient. But it sounded very interesting. It was entitled Ambient Intelligence, in contrast to artificial intelligence, which probably ambient is kind of a subsection of artificial intelligence. And it concluded, that paragraph concluded, it will also enable remote patient monitoring. But I think the challenge is to digitize all the data we already have. Correct? I mean, digitize from now on, but also look back and see, can we make use of all these vast amounts of data?
Absolutely.
So I think the success of this is very data dependent.
Very dependent.
Yeah. Shane?
So instead of talking about specific business model, let me actually just explain the landscape, why I believe blockchain, particularly in our region, is really becoming prevalent. So for crypto, right, there were two big issues with the crypto so far. First was the store of value, which because cryptos fluctuate so much, we couldn't really get a conviction this has a store of value. And second was utility. But over the last several years, with the advancement of like NFT, the DeFi, all these are actually metaverse. All these are actually providing use cases, utilities of the crypto. That's why currently, globally, the blockchain-backed projects, be that a coin, be that a DeFi project, be that an NFT project, are really becoming a mainstream. And as someone who has been studying and really heavily investing in fintech in the region, we do believe that is already coming. For example, I have a story about 6 months ago. I met probably the very first DAO company out of the region. DAO means a decentralized autonomous organization. And what that is, like to simply put, there is a group of team who actually runs a company without a holding company. So I asked, how can I invest, even if I want to invest? They said, oh, you need to invest in a wallet. So there is no company these days who actually have a shareholder agreement, who actually have a structure, so that I cannot really invest in that company. Well, like that's really the new norm, and yes, obviously, as someone who takes the governance and stuff very seriously, we passed on it because we were not ready. But I do believe a lot of that, the new trends are actually happening in reality. And as someone who focused from pre-seed to seed, we're already starting to see and interact with the founders who actually believe that is the goal. So I think it's just some of those are very interesting. And another big reason I believe blockchain-backed projects in our region are also going to be new thesis is one of the liquidity events is through exchanges. And as we know from our region, we already have quite a well-established exchanges that actually provide as a conduit between a project and a coin and also investors. And that, like I recently, Clyde Perkins have put $100 million along with Paradigm, which is probably one of the globally best crypto blockchain investor. And they invested in Rain. And that also is already instigating more and more founders to launch projects. Now they can link with the exchanges. And frankly, in my own view, I think VCs, we and the regulators probably are the slowest ones to integrate because we also have a way of doing business. And then suddenly if someone says you need to invest in a wallet versus there is no company, then it just hits us really hard, like what am I doing here? But I do believe that is very interesting. We had a privilege of backing the region's first NFT, which is also in Saudi, and that company, we believe, they have a huge potential. We are looking at many other applications. For example, DeFi, at the end, there's another way of providing all the banking services, but just in a blockchain minted and a decentralized way. We're actively looking into a space, and we believe we have the right founders now, but also we just need to work very closely with the regulators, how we can help them enable, which will take some time, but also with the smart, good-hearted people, I believe that is happening actually probably within the next 2 years. And as a super early stage VC, I want to be there early on versus being late.
Got it. And you already said that you won't pick up on blockchain technology, but if you tried, would it be crypto security maybe?
So
would it be
crypto-
NFT marketplace?
So the NFT is now a proven business model. So that is a very and when we invest in new sectors like this, it always helps if I can understand the project. NFT is just a fancy blockchain way of saying it's a marketplace or auction of a fraction ownership of an art, of a digital art, of a music, or some kind of a content. So that I can understand. Alright, so you just need to pay now in Ether versus the fiat. So I get that. So I think that is also very common. DeFi, because at the end there's a lending through a crypto way. So I think that is also something very interesting. I do believe in the huge stablecoin thesis that is happening globally. So I also think that is a very interesting idea. And lastly, now in my view, metaverses were crazy because also that concept, the virtual concept, I remember when I was a kid, I watched a movie called Surrogate, where literally the virtual world was already there. But now in the last several years, they suddenly got connected with crypto. Now everyone is talking about metaverse, particularly in the US and particularly in Asia. Right? Frankly, I do not think, I still am struggling, what is so real about it? Why does it matter if I buy a Gucci bag in my metaverse world? They cost me 100 Ether. It's absolutely crazy. However, younger generation do believe that's how they define their, let's say, metaverse reality. Mm-hmm. So there is a trend, and there is a whole economy behind that. Every FMCG and the brand globally is actually also investing in the metaverse. So it's a trend that I think we need to pay attention on. And I think our region, we do need to pay attention on that.
Yeah, I mean, younger generation is already interacting through
So they call it Gen Z.
and,
it's crazy.
Yeah, many reports write about this. That fortunately or unfortunately, I have my own view. Younger people from the generation you just described are much more comfortable interacting online, and not even through their personalities, but through avatars. And those avatars are consumers. So a model I read about is direct to avatar. Not direct to consumer, but direct to avatar. So a character your daughter picked for her online life is actually a consumer that spends money. And so for me, it is very much out there. But then if this becomes a big industry and you're measured against your fund's exposure to it, we should at least pay attention. And that's how you concluded your comments.
If I may just add one last point, one big application that I do hope to see and that we're actively searching within the Shuruk is how can I connect metaverse with blockchain with actual e-commerce, we call social commerce idea. So if I can find a Gucci store and buy there are 100 varieties of Gucci without going to a store, that is value. And if I can press a few buttons and they can be delivered, that's value. That's just the e-commerce 3.0. And I do see that there is already an application being built upon. And like this, avatars or icons, this crazy, the monkey pictures that I need to pay $2 million. I don't really, it's not my style, but at least the actual application of those e-commerce 3.0, I believe is so happening real. and that's actually coming very, very soon. Alright, so just something at least that we have a huge thesis on, we're actively looking.
And back to Earth, Alan?
Yeah, so in the logistics market, there are really two areas that I think are ripe for innovation and ripe for venture investment, and it's already, I think, as I said earlier, happening already, or at least incubating, and that's making the actual transportation and warehousing networks more efficient and effective, and then also the back office work that needs to manage all that is also largely ripe for innovation. Just an example, in the truckload market, if you're a truckload broker today and you're doing takes about two and a half man days, excuse me, 1 man day to process 2.5 trucks in the back office, right? Which is very, very unproductive. And then, on the road, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity, obviously, for further optimization. And what we're seeing now is, the beginnings of autonomous, out in transportation, investments there to, make that more efficient. And we're also seeing that within the warehouses with robotics, right? And, when back in my UPS days, when we'd launch a new facility and we'd say, hey, our next new facility is going to be fully automated. And then I would say, well, why is there going to be 1,000 parking spaces in the parking lot if this is a fully automated building? And the truth is that a lot of what's in the middle is automated, but the unload and the loads are not automated. They're still heavily intensive. And then obviously a lot of the work in the back office just to process the actual order to cash of the information and the funds associated with trucking or ocean is again, largely, very, very unproductive. So out on the road and on the warehouses, we're going to see, innovation, further investment into, autonomous as well as, robotics. They'll be leveraging, AI and machine learning, and potentially I think the blockchain. And then in the back office, we'll be using some of those same tools for optimizing what happens out on the road or in the warehouses, as well as digitizing those processes that are largely done with people today.
Thank you. Waleed?
I couldn't agree more with what I'm hearing from the panel. I mean, if I had to place my bet on the next big thing, it would be, the community social buying that has to be enabled. And that takes a backbone of fintech and logistics to be in place. And there's a huge impact when it comes to that. I mean, in China, what you see is because there's a unified single app that you're able to do it on WeChat, you have ladies that sit at home and tell you, this is a new fresh produce and it's so good, and everybody trusts her in her own social circle, and she's able to generate revenue and income for her and her family. So the power of technology and social buying to be able to come into every household in emerging markets is very, very powerful, and having the backbone of logistics to be able to make that a reality. And then I couldn't agree more with what Shane said. The cherry on top is if you could merge that then into e-commerce 3.0 into the virtual world, and then kind of the sky's the limit in terms of what selection you can get and how you can get it and when it arrives to you. And that makes me super excited because it's not for the few. I think it's going to be mass impact. I feel like we just have to get sort of the roads and the rails up and running so that we can have that huge impact. But like I said, it's super, super exciting what's happening. And, going back to Generation Z, my son buys avatars and buys clothes for avatars and shares it with his friends, and that's their world. And we're not going to be able to stop that. And that is the future. So if you put an underlying business model and commerce fundamentals on that. There you go. That's the future of the economy.
They all create value, like a real tangible value for the economy. And it's crazy.
Yes. This is the last panel. I mean, just to keep it a little bit interesting, and it's been a long day. Does anyone from the audience have an opinion on the next big thing? I mean, would anyone venture, say what they think the next big thing is? Obviously, that will be your opinion based on your own personal experience. So there's no downside to share with us. Yes.
Perhaps while we wait, I do have a quick discussion point because when I think about Saudi, because perhaps it was a bit difficult for me to find an apartment. I know we also struggled to find our own office. I do believe, and I did discuss this with the STB some time ago, like I believe there's huge potential for PropTech. I think a lot of us know that. And I think some of us are actively still looking for companies in that space. But still, we couldn't find, I don't think it's even close to being mainstream, right? And I think a lot of it has to come into like VCs, but also founders, but also regulation, but also just like, perhaps we need a more centralized database, which I know there's a ministry for that, who is trying to be a lot more active. So I do think hopefully that's coming very soon. But given where we are in terms of many other tech verticals, somehow I feel our PropTech compared to other fintech verticals, we're still substantially behind. So I believe that is a sector that at least we're also quite keen on, and we're doing our own thesis-driven sourcing on that. Thank you.
Hi, Sun Ashpan from Econ Capital. I don't have an opinion specifically on what I think the next big thing is, but I think it's important to realize how short the life cycle of technologies have become. And my favorite example for this is the way that we listen to music. I mean, for the longest time, from the minute it was invented in 1864, the vinyl record was the state-of-the-art way to listen to music. And that lasted for about 100 years. And then you had the cassette tape from like the 60s till the 70s, and then the CD came along, and then MP3 had its 15 minutes of fame, and now everything is streaming, and people don't really own anything in terms of books or movies or things like that. Everything is being beamed to you. And so I think one thing that needs to be taken into consideration with what is the next big thing is how short those life cycles of technology are. And as VC investors, how disruptive that can become and how we think about that in terms of what it is that we're going to be investing in. Because if whatever the next big thing is, and you invest in it and you double down on it, and then you're not ready for that life cycle change, then you're out of luck.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
That's a great point. I think that, you know, when you look at, you know, the things you want to have in place to be able to put blockchain in, you know, lots of players, you know, in a market, and, you know, maybe not as much trust, you know, in the market. So you want to put blockchain to be very applicable to logistics. You know, the challenge is to get everybody to play the sandbox together in order to make that happen. You know, there was an example, you know, case study, you know, up in Canada with Walmart, you know, who has some clout, right? And they had about 80 carriers that were supplying the Walmart infrastructure in Canada. And they got all of them to play, you know, on the blockchain. And basically, you know, it was truckers and Walmart, and you know, before they put them on the blockchain, you know, the amount of work that went into ordering the truck, making the appointment, you know, understanding, you know, when it was going to arrive, and that Walmart was going to have a door to put the truck on and unload the merchandise, and then, you know, manage all that information associated with that, as well as managing the funds transfer. I mean, again, the amount of people that it took at the trucker and at Walmart to make that transaction work was basically abominable. And they were able to get everybody on the blockchain. And the case study shows that they were able to save, at least Walmart, I'm not sure if it was the whole of everybody in the exercise, but about $30 million a year, as well as create much more visibility and much better experience for both the trucking companies and Walmart to be able to manage their business more effectively, and in a much more solid partnership. But the amount of time and effort that was invested in to make that happen, and if the next big thing comes, as people are, kind of like these the ERP integrations that we all know well, how much muscle it takes to switch, over to SAP or Oracle from whatever you're on before, and then something else happens. So I think there's a lot of promise for what blockchain can do in the logistics industry to both streamline, both what happens in the physical environment, in the actual movement of goods, as well as the flow of information flow.
Good. Any other? There is one more. Excellent.
Hi, this is Sam Harai. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Lendo. So when it comes to opportunities, I want to highlight that MENA generally does not have a legacy system problems. So in a mature market, most of the ecosystem development came in to fix the legacy problems. Over here, we have first to do everything, like recently, and so we can adapt directly to the newest technologies. And sometimes the regulators, governments don't think about it, sometimes they do think and they adapt to the latest technology when they develop. So I can give you multiple examples, positive and negative. For example, in the US you have social security number where you need to hide your social security date of birth, and if you declare it, you might get identified. Over here, your ID is public info, and the government provides you API to access the information, verify it, and you can do supreme KYC and onboarding, and you can have huge use cases for such a technology. On the negative side, for example, e-invoicing has been there for Europe for years, and Saudi just implemented. I wish they would have done complete blockchain decentralized e-invoicing rather than building a centralized database with the tax authority. So the beauty of such ecosystem that we are building something ground up, and we can build it with latest technologies and evolve it. Something Shane mentioned, PropTech. In US, you have buy-side agent, sell-side agent, they take 3%, 3.6% commission goes in any sale or rental. Over here, we don't have agent system in the first place, so we don't need to fix that legacy agent problem. That's just build it right from the clean business models from right ground up. So opportunities lies in MENA ecosystem because we don't have any legacy issues, and we can really build innovative products right from where we don't need to look what's happening, and we can fix it from ground up. And that gives you opportunities across different sectors. I think education is still in MENA ready for disruption. Nothing much happened. In Western markets, they're building boot camps and the academies. Nobody actually went down and fixed the higher education problem. Why boot camps exist? Because higher education sucks. So they need to, and then they have unicorns now in education. Over here, somebody needs to fix all the ground-up problem, and there's opportunity across every single sector, which is fintech, proptech, edtech, SaaS, logistics, every single opportunity, and we can utilize the latest technologies to solve it without having any problems with legacy and conversion, and that reduces the cost of customer acquisition, education, market adoption. All of that becomes super easy because everybody's ready for the latest technology, and there's no stickiness to any old legacy problems.
I completely agree, and that's why I'm perfectly biased to say that Osama is one of the best founders we're able to back us. But what I did want to highlight, guys, is we do believe anything that supports the factoring, the SME, invoice factoring like Lendo is really the backbone. We call it infrastructure fintech thesis. Because if you think about what really constitutes the Saudi economy, like there are obviously conglomerates, but also like predominantly SMEs or MSMEs, and then they're frankly still quite underserved by the banks. And if we can have fintechs to really give them the fair chance that they deserve, just simple things like managing working capital, right? I really think the whole country will get uplifted like 5 times, 10 times. And like I saw one of the earlier slides, how we can really increase our economic activities. I think that is just the basic backbone of what it needs to happen. And I'm really encouraged to see quite a few fintech players like Lendo can really enable that. And we have been quite fortunate enough to join their journey.
Good. I think in the interest of time, I suggest we all part with the audience by saying a couple of sentences, whether reiterating what we believe is our next big thing, or whatever else broadly in the topic you want to tell the audience. And I'll start. In my view, I'm a very big believer in data, and we tell every founder, what do you do with, and we talk to a lot of founders all the time, what do you do with the data? And a lot of founders, if not most, don't do much with the data at the moment, for 2 reasons. First, there's very little data, because the companies we talk to, Shane, sometimes are 5 months old, so they don't have much data. But even those that have been in existence for 2-3 years, they don't do much with the data. So, and we tell them, you're a data company, you need to do more with your data. And then the applicability of that data to develop, whether it's artificial intelligent solutions or just better solutions, forget the acronyms and the buzzwords, in particular in health tech, education tech, and e-commerce. So I think just making use of the data we already have is the next big thing for me.
Couldn't have said it better. You're exactly right. It's right. In health tech, it really, the underlying deep value is the data and multiple things that can come with it. The next big thing, and kind of reflecting on the previous panel about is there enough money or is there too much money or what have you, I guess I want to make the question, are we filling the pipeline enough with quality entrepreneurs? Or do we have enough entrepreneurs coming in because we know the hunger for innovation is out there, whether it's large strategic corporations or logistics that are looking for it or blocking it. Hunger for innovation is out there. Do we have, or is the infrastructure in place to fuel entrepreneurship and get more entrepreneurs into this pipeline? Because it sounded to me to the other panel, money's not the issue. Carving it up, that's what they are really good at. How about the people who really lift their hands? And that's where I really find great enjoyment in venture capital, early stage venture capital. And my colleague Shane here just described some things related to blockchain and smart contracting so quickly that he helped that whole industry that much better. And that's part of our responsibility, is not just provide money or provide guidance, but also help promote that market, that new vision, that future. Anyway, thank you.
And you? Thank you.
So I'll actually just add another consideration, fun topic. As we might know, some of us know, Saudi is probably globally the largest YouTube consumption country. So we as a country and also region have always been like a content consumption driven country in the economy. Like as a Korean with so much love for Saudi and the region, I sometimes hope, and I do believe we can actually create content and export that. And Korea is a very good example of that. Korea in the past, actually surprisingly, we didn't create content. We absorbed everything from Japan and just made it to our way. But now in the last 30 years, everyone now talks about Squid Games, etc. Everyone thinks the Koreans are super tall, super handsome, but so they don't think I'm Korean. Like when I walk around. So what I learned is if we have a focus, and And I do believe we have a lot of great culture and the characteristics to show and to really export to the world. And I want us to really incubate and support those founders. We did see some companies want to create a webtoons. We did see some companies want to create content, but we definitely don't see enough. And I know that as a VC, we do sometimes have a bias. Oh, media entertainment company, can they do well? Are there going to be enough for defunding down the road? Perhaps we can help them fund into Series A, but after Series A, who's going to give them $20 million? And I honestly don't have the answer for that. So perhaps what we as a group need to do is, if we think about 20 years from now, what can Saudi also be proud of in addition to resources, but also tech? Perhaps the cultural content element, I think, is a very good angle, and I believe we can do it, right? Because we do have a lot of, let's say, in my humble view, unique characteristics.
Well, look, I've been here about 48 hours, and I got to tell you, I've learned a lot more than I could possibly give back to this group in the last 48 hours. But a couple of things that I did learn is obviously that transportation, logistics, and log tech is one of the segments that Saudi and specifically Venture want to focus on. And number two, you know, you believe that there's a business case for Saudi Arabia Kingdom to be the hub, here in the MENA region, both to facilitate trade throughout MENA and Africa, and also the connection points, to say Europe and Asia. And, I'll just leave you with one example. Back when UPS was expanding into Asia many, many years ago, we realized that the intra-Asia market was just as big and robust as the intercontinental Asia market back to Europe and the United States, what was going to be. And at that time, China wasn't a very open place to do business. And us and FedEx, located our air hub in the Philippines. It wasn't quite optimal, but it served its purpose until China opened up, and slowly but surely, yes, and FedEx moved our hubs into South China. And I think the same holds true for here. And again, I knew a little bit to be dangerous afar about the Middle East, and specifically KSA. And I got to tell you, my expectations have been exceeded with how far you've come in moving, to the vision that you guys share with us today. And I couldn't be more excited about the opportunity to come to that realization that the kingdom here could actually become the transportation logistics hub of this particular region. Thank you for the opportunity.
Walid? Volume, please. Walid, wait, we can't hear you. Perhaps you're on mute?
If a conference doesn't have a technical difficulty, we say it's not a conference. Right? No, it's not a technical difficulty.
Give us a second. If not, we will wrap up, but maybe we can get the volume up.
Yeah.
I think, yes, Mike. I think this is not going to work. I thank you, all my panelists, and thank you all for staying until the last panel. We have, I think, one last departing speech to hear. It's been a pleasure to be part of this event today, and thank you for being with us until the end.
I just want to thank every single one in this room for sticking this far, and I know it's been a long day, but a lot of exciting conversations, a lot of exciting sort of commentary from everybody in the audience, very engaging, and I couldn't be happier to have all of you guys here. We really, really believe that the minute you put like-minded people in one room, magic will automatically be sparked. And I believe we achieved that. So thank you so much for being part of this journey and and getting us to learn a lot from your experiences. Thank you very much.